Good morning, and thank you for joining us for our latest media briefing on back to school health and safety checkup for students and families. I'm Dr. Abdurrahman, and I am an allergist and clinical immunologist in Mississauga, and I'm the president of the Ontario Medical Association, which represents more than 43,000 doctors. The return to school is a time of excitement and also a time to remember to put all safety checks in place for a safe and happy school year. The two top areas I think about in my practice are vaccines and food allergies. Ontario has had the highest number of measles cases in Canada this year, with more than 2,300 cases reported as of August 16th. Shockingly, the province was also the measles center of the entire Western Hemisphere back in June, and we may see more outbreaks as kids return to school. Almost three-quarters of the cases have been in unvaccinated children, underscoring the need for parents to ensure their children are up to date on vaccinations ahead of the school year. With students being back in such close contact in classrooms, it's also a good time to consider other important immunizations. This includes the updated COVID-19 vaccine and the annual flu shot in the fall. For my food allergy kids, every student deserves a full and safe school experience. From field trips to eating with friends at lunchtime, kids just want to fit in with their peers. And for kids with allergies, these activities can be particularly challenging for them to participate in safely. That's why it's so important for their parents to send them to school with a plan and proper documentation. All children with food allergies should be heading into the school year with an anaphylaxis action plan. For older kids with food allergies, now's a good time to remind them about their plan, but also review how to use their EpiPen. There are currently more than 3 million Canadians affected by food allergies, one of the leading causes of life-threatening anaphylactic reactions. Because there's no way of predicting how severe an allergic reaction may be and no known cure, avoiding the food you're allergic to is a crucial step in prevention and keeping everyone safe. And now I'd like to introduce today's panelists, who will also be speaking about the trends they see in their specialties and provide more details about what families and students should do to stay healthy and safe going back to school. We have Dr. Daniela Lobo. She is an addiction psychiatrist and the medical head of problem gambling and technology services at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. She will speak about addiction trends among youth, such as online gambling and the high levels of vaping and nicotine pouch use in Ontario, as well as mental health support for students. We have also Dr. Steve Lynn, who is an emergency physician, a trauma team leader, and the interim chief of emergency medicine at St. Michael's Hospital. He'll be focused on road safety for parents and kids going back to school and his personal experience on what types of road safety injuries he's seeing in the emergency room. We're going to start with Dr. Lobo, who'll tell us about her experience as a psychiatrist and what issues parents should be looking out for with addictions and mental health ahead of the new year. Dr. Lobo.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. And for youth, it's such an exciting time to be growing up, developing, making new social connections. It's also a very vulnerable time because between the ages of 15 and 24 is when you have a very high rate of brain development, which also means that the youth is much more vulnerable to developing mental health and addiction concerns. So, just to give people some understanding of the picture that we have in Ontario currently, there's some data from the Ontario Drug Use and Student Survey that I find very useful. So this survey, it looks at trends in substance use and mental health in youth between grade 7 and 12 across the province. So what we see is that the most common substance that's used is alcohol by about 35% of students. Doesn't mean that it's used in a harmful way, but just used overall. Non-medical use of opioid pain relievers, 22%, which is quite concerning. Cannabis, 18%. And e-cigarettes, vapes, nicotine pouches, about 13% of kids are using, which is quite high. So how do parents deal with this? So when we talk about prevention, we're talking about being able to talk to your kids about how they see substance use, what do they think about it, and also look for reliable information together. Important to keep these conversations short. Try to get an understanding of what's the importance of these behaviors for them and what they are seeing at school, and validate their concerns about, oh, but it's so hard to say no when people are telling you that it's school and you have to use it, or when you want to fit in. Oh, it's hard just to know what to say. And have these short, brief conversations rather than going into the lecturing format. It's a lot more useful. The other thing we have to be aware of is the use of cannabis that has been quite high, and that has resulted in a lot more mental health concerns and hospitalizations, in particular in Ontario. Ontario has the highest number of cannabis stores in Canada. We have 1,700 cannabis stores in Ontario, as opposed to, for instance, Quebec, that has 100 dispensaries. Quebec has the lowest number of health concerns related to cannabis. So how also to perceive what are the signs that you see when youth are struggling with mental health and addictions. So usually the most obvious sign is you see your child getting home intoxicated, for instance. Also, kids who start to lose sleep. So these are the kids that many times they are very tired in the morning, unusually so, and you may start noticing that they are using their phone through the night. They may be uh, using social media or gaming through the night. And it's very important to have those conversations. The other sign is kids who are withdrawing more, staying more at home, um, not connecting with family, and having more conflicts with family. So things that I would like parents to keep in mind is that it's very important. How do you model your own substance use and how you cope with stress? So kids are very, very attuned to what the parents are doing, even if they don't show it. So how you use substances or how you avoid substances, how you cope with stress, and how you express your emotions will be important to model to your kids. Always choose the right time and place to talk to your kids. It's no use talking to a kid when you have been worried sick at home and it's 1 a.m. and they have just arrived home. Be curious about what's actually happening and how they feel about it. Validate their emotions and concerns, and look for info together in trusted sites. So I always recommend the site from the uh, Center for Addiction Mental Health, which is where I work. They have very valuable information on substances, mental health for youth, and also how to access services.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lobo. I'd like to turn things over to Dr. Lynn to talk to us a little bit about some of the safety concerns and specifically road safety and such from the emergency perspective. Please, Dr. Lynn.
Great. Well, thank you for having me today. Now, as students head back to school, there's a lot of excitement. New teachers, new classes, and reconnecting with friends. But it's also one of the busiest and sometimes most riskiest times on our roads and our sidewalks. So really, safety really needs to be on top of mind for students, families, educators, and our communities. Now, road safety injuries and even mortality is still considered the highest according to the WHO for those who are ages between 5 and 29. So our children and our youth and our young adults are all at risk. So really, one of the most important parts of the conversation is how children travel to and from school each day, which we really should focus on. So let's start with walking safety, because many children still walk all the way or part way to school every single day. Now, it may sound simple, but the basics are still the most important. Always use crosswalks, obey traffic signals, and remember the rule that we've always been taught: look left, right, and then left again before crossing. Now, students should not assume that drivers see them, They should try to make eye contact with the drivers whenever possible. And while it's tempting to walk with your head down, looking at your phone, or listening to loud music, either on headphones or earphones, really staying alert and being aware of your surroundings is what truly keeps people safe. Also, walking with a buddy or walking with a group of friends is also a good habit. One, it's more fun, and it's also a great way to add an extra layer of safety for everyone. Now, there's increasing use of bicycles, e-scooters, and e-bikes. For those who actually ride them, the number one rule is still this: always wear a helmet. It's not negotiable. Helmets reduce the risk of serious head injury and mortality, and it saves lives. It can reduce that risk by up to 88%. And so that's an extremely large reduction in risk, and really is non-negotiable and needs to be done. Riders should also check their equipment, make sure that their brakes work, their tires are inflated, they have lights and reflectors that are in place. And once they're on the road, the same traffic laws were applied to them as well. That means riding in the same direction as traffic, signaling turns, and stopping fully at red lights and stop signs. So visibility is also key. They need to be wearing bright clothing, reflective gear, and make sure that there's front and rear lights that really make a difference, especially as the mornings and evenings become darker and darker. So when riders get to school, it's also important to dismount and walk their bike or scooter through school zones or crowded sidewalks. So these small steps can really prevent accidents, and it's for the safety of everyone. Now, for students who take the school bus, there are a couple of simple rules that really make the ride much safer. Try to arrive at the bus stop a few minutes early and wait in a safe spot away from the road. Now, when the school bus arrives, wait until the school bus comes to a complete stop before approaching the school bus. Now, if a student needs to cross the street after getting off, they should always cross in front of the bus, never behind it. And walking far enough ahead so that they're visible to the driver. And children should really still look both ways before crossing any roads. Another thing that they should be aware of is stranger awareness. While the majority of people that students meet are kind and safe, it's still really important that they know not to accept rides, invitations, or gifts from someone they don't know. If at any point a student feels uncomfortable or unsafe, they should go directly to a teacher, to a parent, or another trusted adult. And really having the confidence in speaking up is part of their safety as well. But safety really doesn't just rest on the shoulders of the students. As a community of drivers, we have a huge role to play as well. Back to school season really means more foot traffic, more bicycles, more scooters, and more school buses stopping frequently. We really need drivers to slow down in school zones, stay alert for students as they cross, and never pass a stopped school bus. That extra caution, just a few seconds of patience, can really prevent tragedies. Now, at the heart of all of this is really the simple truth that safety is a shared responsibility. Students, parents, teachers, and drivers all have a part to play. So when students practice safe walking, biking, or riding habits, when parents reinforce these lessons, and when drivers stay attentive and be cautious, we can really create a safe environment for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're going to move into our Q&A session. I would ask for you to please write your questions in the Q&A, and we'll do our best to answer all of them. And then I'll actually turn things over to the OMA's Adam Miller, who will be moderating this portion of today's briefing. Adam, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Abdurrahman. And thank you so much to our panelists, Dr. Lobo and Dr. Lin. So we're going to open it up to questions. And we've got one here for you, Dr. Abdurrahman. So when it comes to measles vaccinations, what can parents and students do to combat a herd mentality that promotes vaccine hesitancy?
Thank you for that question. We've definitely had a lot of hesitancy around vaccines, including the measles vaccine. I think the first thing is to really have open dialogue and have discussion about it, and really explain to everyone that having the vaccine is actually a safer way of protecting your body rather than putting you at risk for all the complications that you can have with disease. Also, if you don't feel comfortable in terms of providing that information, asking them to talk to someone that they do trust in the healthcare field as well, their family doctor, pediatrician, anyone that they can as well, and really explain to everyone that keeping kids healthy keeps our classrooms open. This is what we want. We want kids to be able to go to school. And unfortunately, having measles in our community has led to closing of a lot of these activities, such as schools or other close contact areas. So we all have to do our part, and really being open though with it, because sometimes people are very defensive about choices. So really trying to help have discussion and direct them to places that they feel comfortable to get information from a healthcare provider that they trust.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we have a question from Nathan Bawan at the Toronto Star. This is for Dr. Lin. What sort of numbers are we seeing when it comes to injuries or deaths related to e-bike or e-scooter accidents among youth? And are we seeing more accidents in recent years or months?
Yeah, so great question. We definitely are seeing increased use of kind of e-bikes and e-scooters, and there's a lot of recent focus on them, particularly when we're looking at injuries from both children, youth, and even adults. We're seeing a slow rise that happened a few years ago in terms of the number of injuries that we're seeing, but now we're actually seeing a spike, and this just correlates perfectly well with the number of people using e-bikes and e-scooters. So we're seeing people who are having serious injuries from these, who require hospitalization, and from St. Michael's Hospital, which is a trauma center, we're actually seeing increased hospital admissions due to these injuries, and they're particularly having severe head injuries, kind of facial injuries, as well as some extremity injuries, and so we're seeing a rise in those hospital admissions, which we all need to be very mindful on how safely to use these kind of riding devices, because they're not as regulated as they used to, as like a motorcycle, but they can go very fast. So making sure that you have your helmet on, making sure that you're obeying traffic rules, watching out for other pedestrians on the road, watching for cars. There's a real need for a good focus on being safe when using these vehicles.
Great, thank you. We have a question for Dr. Lobo. So what are some signs that a teen is starting to get hooked on online gambling?
So that's a great question, because now online gambling has become a lot more accessible, especially with the possibility of people doing in sports play. So if you have a teen who has their own money, you might be noticing that they're spending that money and they're asking you for more money. The other thing that happens is it does cause a certain level of stress, because inevitably they will start losing, and they will become more preoccupied with money, more irritable. They will be, perhaps if they're betting on sports, which is becoming more common, they will become more preoccupied with games more than usual. And instead of, for instance, relaxing and watching the game and commenting on it, they might be preoccupied with how that game is going to turn out, or how that play is going to turn out. And instead of actually watching the game, they're going to be on their phones all the time. That's a big one, because that's how you're making the bets. But again, overall, it is important to also have a conversation. It's interesting. The other day, I heard a parent tell me, I was going through a lottery terminal, and my kid asked me, "Oh, how much can you win on that?" And the question is, how much actually can you lose on it? Because the odds of winning are so low. And the problems that you can get from it, the consequences are very high. So talking about potential consequences rather than going with the marketing of what's enticing about gambling is very important.
Great answer. Thank you very much. We have another question for you, Dr. Lobo. Can you describe what the video game to online gambling pipeline is?
Yes, that's a very important question. So what has been happening is a blurring between gaming and gambling. So when you're looking at online gaming, there's such a variety. But what we're looking at is loot boxes, which in online gaming means these places where you can click and you can spend either points that you have or money to get a reward. Now, that reward can be something that it's going to be very useful for you in the game, or it may be something that's not useful, maybe just a skin for your avatar. The other thing is the online leagues, sports leagues, the esports, and that starts really spilling into gambling because not only you make your league, but you can make bets with that as well. So everything is converging in a way. When you look at a very interesting study a few years ago, looked at the percentage of apps, game apps on the App Store and the Google Store that had loot boxes for kids. And for kids aged 12 and over 40% of the games have loot boxes. So very important to be very aware of what your kids have downloaded on their devices and really be mindful of that.
Great, thank you. We have another question for Dr. Lin related to road safety. So road safety's changed a lot in recent years with more cars, e-scooters, and e-bikes on the road than ever. You've touched on this a bit, but how can kids and family navigate traffic safely on foot or by bike when you've got so many more vehicles on the road?
Yeah, these are really the concerns as we get more of these vehicles on the road. I think people and as students and parents just have to be very much more mindful that they're around. There's increased use, and sometimes the e-scooters and e-bikes are going as fast as a motorized vehicle. So it's multifactorial where the actual riders themselves need to be very mindful on how they use the e-scooter and e-bike. They need to be safe themselves with wearing kind of a helmet, having protective gear, following the rules of the road, using bike lanes if needed. But the pedestrians on the road, the pedestrians walking on the sidewalk also need to be mindful that these things can sometimes be used on the sidewalk and just being not distracted. And so if you're not being distracted, you're definitely going to be much more aware of your surroundings and kind of steering clear and understanding that we're sharing kind of a limited space with things that actually move a lot faster now. So just having that awareness can be extremely helpful. In terms of drivers, I touched upon this a bit. In terms of drivers, we're seeing that there's an increased use of these e-bikes and e-scooters. Drivers need to be more mindful that there's more shared vehicles now on the road, and so we need to be mindful when we're turning, when we're changing lanes, that there are these vehicles there that are moving quite fast as well. And so I think just increased awareness would be extremely helpful in all of these.
You're on mute, Adam.
Apologies. We have one more question for you, Dr. Abdurrahman. It's a question about food allergies. So how can parents ensure children with food allergies are included in all school activities?
This is a great question, especially because really we want a safe school where every child, whether they have allergy or not, can learn without fear and can participate in all the different activities. And so the key is really the education around it. So depending on the age of your child, having your child also be aware of things that they need to watch out for in terms of not swapping food or trading food, making sure that they have their own lunches with them so that there's no temptation to look at other lunch boxes. And then also the education with the school. So ensuring that you're talking to the teachers, if there are activities, field trips, talking through it, ensuring that all the safety plans are in place. We have epinephrine auto injectors. You know how many meals there are to ensure that there is safe food supplies for the different times that there might be snacks. Kids eat a lot, especially on field trips. And then also trying to raise awareness even with the peers, depending on the ages. And so sometimes that can be very age appropriate as you're getting into kind of grade 1 and 2 and 3, where they like to talk about different aspects like that. Obviously, if they're much younger, it's a little bit different, but trying to also involve everyone so that we all know that we all have different limitations in certain things, such as the foods that we eat. So lots to people to talk about, but really it's about education, making sure everyone is aware and ensuring that we have the right tools in place so that the children have a seamless way through their school journeys.
Great, thank you so much. We have another question for Dr. Lobo. Are you seeing a rise in popularity of nicotine pouch use with youth? And how can parents tackle this issue when they're so inconspicuous?
So even though we don't see it yet in the studies because the rates in the studies always lag, we are seeing more of that, both reports from parents and from youth. And it's very problematic because there's a lot of targeting in terms of the nicotine pouches to youth. So it's really, again, it goes back to communication, which sometimes is very difficult and challenging. However, talking about, yeah, lots of people are using nicotine pouches and they are not aware that it can cause a dependence the same way that cigarettes do. It increases substantially the risk of problems in your teeth, gums. And what people are not aware of is the increase of risk in oral cancer overall. Tongue cancer, throat cancer, oral cancer, all in the oral area. So really talk to kids about, I like to talk to kids sometimes about what's the purpose of all this marketing. There's always somebody making money behind something that's potentially dangerous. And if that's what you really want to do with your health and with your body, right? So talking a little bit about the responsibility you have in terms of your body and also how things that may seem harmless can actually potentially cause a lot of harm. Kids are going to experiment. The problem is when the experimentation becomes a habit, and nicotine is highly, highly addictive. So it's very hard to get off of a nicotine addiction, and it's important to talk to this and be very open about to your kids about that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And back to Dr. Abdurrahman. So how can parents help to prevent their child from being bullied because of their food allergies?
Thank you. Bullying is an issue that we definitely need to be aware of for children with food allergies, but actually for all children going back to school. One of the things I would say to start is if there was any issues with bullying in the previous year, ensuring that you've talked about it with the teachers, with the school ahead of time, and also make sure you're having these conversations with your children. I think similar to what Dr. Lobo said, these kind of short conversations each time just to say, how are things going? Are you having any issues? Trying to identify any concerns about bullying early is key for the intervention because then you can intervene with the school, with the teachers, with the children, and try to put in plans in place to allow for this to be addressed. Essentially, education is the crux of this, really, and education with the peers as well to normalize it. Food allergy is so common. And so we should try not to really seclude the children. That's why it's so important with kids with food allergies to be able to go through school just like everyone else without being so pulled apart or set aside, right? We want it to just be part of their regular daily school. They just have to be a little bit careful about what they're eating and have their epinephrine autoinjectors present. But honestly, it's about normalizing it and identifying it early and really noticing if your child is a little bit more quiet or doesn't want to go to school and having these conversations with them about what's happening in the school and addressing it early.
Okay, great. Well, I believe that was our last question, unless there are any other questions from anyone else here. Otherwise, Dr. Abdurrahman, I'll throw it back to you.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending today's briefing and for your thoughtful questions. If you do come up with questions later, please reach out to our media team. You can also email media@oma.org with requests for any interviews or further information. And a recording of this session will be available on the OMA's YouTube channel immediately following the briefing. Thank you once again, and wishing everyone a safe and happy school year.